losing weight and then watching it come back is one of the most demoralizing experiences in fitness. And it happens to women at a rate that should make everyone question whether the approaches being sold actually work or whether they are specifically designed to produce exactly this outcome. You restrict, you lose some weight, you eventually return to eating like a normal human being, and within weeks or months the weight is back, sometimes with a little extra on top, and you're left wondering what is wrong with you. That question, asked in some form by almost every woman who has been through this cycle more than once, is the wrong question entirely. Nothing is wrong with you. Something is wrong with the method, and understanding exactly what is happening inside your body during that cycle is the only way to actually break out of it. The first thing you need to understand is what most weight loss actually is versus what people assume it is. When the scale drops during a typical diet, particularly an aggressive one, the weight being lost is not purely fat. It is a combination of fat, water, glycogen, and muscle tissue, and the ratio of those things depends heavily on how the diet was structured. Aggressive calorie restriction with high cardio volume, which is the approach most women are sold, produces weight loss that is disproportionately lean mass and water compared to actual fat tissue. Glycogen is the stored form of carbohydrate in your muscles and liver, and it binds to water. So when you reduce carbohydrate intake significantly, you lose glycogen and the water attached to it quickly, which shows up as rapid initial scale weight loss that feels like fat loss, but is mostly just your body releasing stored carbohydrate and its associated water. The moment you eat normally again, glycogen gets restored, water comes back with it, and several pounds reappear on the scale within days through a process that has nothing to do with fat regain. The muscle loss piece is where the real long-term damage happens. Muscle tissue is metabolically active, meaning your body burns calories to maintain it even at rest. When a diet causes significant muscle loss alongside fat loss, which most aggressive diets do, you finish that diet with a lower resting metabolic rate than you started with. Your body now needs fewer calories to maintain its new weight than it needed to maintain your previous weight. Not just because you weigh less, but because you have less muscle tissue running in the background, burning energy. This means the calorie level you were eating before the diet, your normal eating, is now above your body's maintenance requirement. So returning to normal eating after the diet produces fat gain, not because you're eating excessively, but because your metabolism adapted downward during the diet, and your normal is now a surplus relative to your new baseline. Metabolic adaptation goes beyond just muscle loss and is more comprehensive than most people realize. During a period of significant calorie restriction, your body makes dozens of adjustments across multiple systems to reduce its total energy expenditure. Thyroid hormone production decreases. Non-exercise activity, the unconscious movement you do throughout the day, decreases as your body conserves energy. The thermic effect of food, the calories your body burns digesting what you eat, decreases. Your body becomes more efficient at extracting energy from the food you do eat. All of these adaptations happen gradually during restriction, and they do not reverse immediately when you start eating more. They reverse slowly over time, and in some cases with prolonged or repeated dieting, they do not fully reverse without deliberate intervention. The metabolism you have after finishing a diet is meaningfully slower than the metabolism you had before starting it, and eating the way you ate before the diet will now produce weight gain at a rate that feels completely disproportionate to what you are actually consuming. Hunger hormones after dieting are not normal, and they stay dysregulated for longer than anyone wants to hear. Research has shown that ghrelin, the hormone that signals hunger, remains elevated above pre-diet levels for extended periods after weight loss, sometimes for a year or longer. Leptin, the hormone that signals fullness and helps regulate long-term energy balance, decreases with fat loss and stays suppressed. This means after you finish a diet, you are hormonally hungrier than you were before you started it, and you feel less satisfied by the food you eat than you did before. Your brain's reward response to food is heightened. Your cravings are more intense, and your body's drive to restore its previous energy stores is operating at full intensity through mechanisms that are largely outside of conscious control. The weight regain that follows most diets is not a failure of willpower. It is a coordinated biological response from a body that interpreted the diet as a threat and is now doing everything in its power to make sure that threat does not happen again. Fat cells make this worse in a way that is particularly frustrating. When you lose fat, your fat cells do not disappear. They shrink. And shrunken fat cells produce less leptin, are more sensitive to insulin-driven fat storage signals, and are biologically primed to refill as quickly as possible. Your body treats depleted fat stores as a problem to be solved rather than a goal to be maintained. The drive to restore fat stores is active and persistent, and it operates through appetite signals, metabolic adjustments, and hormonal changes that are all pushing in the same direction at the same time. Maintaining fat loss requires fighting against all of those signals simultaneously, which is why the statistics on long-term weight loss maintenance are as discouraging as they are, and why the people who do maintain fat loss long-term almost always describe having to be permanently more conscious about food and activity than people who never dieted in the first place. The specific pattern of where fat returns after dieting is also worth understanding. Research on fat regain after weight loss shows that fat tends to return preferentially to the midsection and visceral areas before it returns to the limbs and lower body. This means women who lost weight relatively evenly or saw good progress in their midsection often find that regained weight accumulates disproportionately around the stomach and waist. This is partly driven by the elevated cortisol that accompanies the stress of dieting and the stress of the post-diet hormonal environment, and partly driven by the way insulin sensitivity and fat cell activity changes during the regain process. The result is a body composition that can end up worse than where you started even at the same scale weight, with more central fat and less muscle than before the diet began. Repeated dieting cycles compound all of these effects progressively. Each cycle of restriction and regain leaves you with slightly less muscle, a slightly slower metabolism, slightly more disrupted hunger hormones, and slightly more central fat distribution than the previous cycle. This is why women who have been dieting on and off for years often find it genuinely harder to lose weight than they did the first time they tried, and why their body seems to gain weight faster and more readily than it used to. The body is not being irrational. It is responding adaptively to a repeated pattern of restriction by becoming progressively better at conserving energy and storing fat efficiently, because from its perspective, that is exactly the right response to the environment it has been living in. The way out of this cycle is not another diet. It is building the muscle mass that keeps your resting metabolism elevated, eating enough protein to support that muscle consistently, managing the caloric balance over the long term without the extreme swings that trigger metabolic adaptation, and giving your body enough time in a state of adequate nutrition that your hormones normalize, your hunger signals recalibrate, and your metabolism recovers the function that repeated restriction suppressed. This process is slower than a diet. It does not produce dramatic scale drops in the first few weeks. It does not look impressive in a before and after photo at the 6-week mark, but it produces a body composition that is actually different from where you started, with the muscle and metabolic rate to maintain that difference without requiring permanent suffering to sustain it. The weight comes back fast because the methods used to lose it were never designed to address the underlying biology. They were designed to move the scale in the short term, which they do reliably, while creating the exact conditions that guarantee the weight returns once the methods stop. Understanding that cycle clearly enough to step outside of it is the most useful thing the fitness industry never taught you.